Good evening and welcome to the Modise Network.
Tonight, we explore the scourge of corruption and its devastating effects in the public and corporate life of South Africa with Sygnia CEO Magda Wierzycka. Later on, Business Unity South Africa's president, Sipho Pichana, will talk to us about the efforts to bring foreign direct investments into South Africa, and this include the BRICS meetings to be held this next week.
I'm Tim Modise and thank you for joining me this evening. And please join the network's conversation this evening with your comments or questions on the hashtag the Modise Network. Over the years, the scourge of corruption has dominated the public discourse of South Africa and in the process undermining the confidence of citizens in public institutions. Corruption is now known by its notorious name, state capture. The coverage it has received has given rise to the impression that the corporate sector is cleaner or that the corporate sector is being treated with kid gloves by the media. The effects of corruption are felt in the poor delivery of services, the destruction of economic opportunities, and the erosion of social fiber. One outspoken critic of this cancer is Magda Wierzycka, who is the CEO of Sygnia, and she joins me on camera from Cape Town studios. And Magda, pleasure to talk to you.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Well, you've been in this war, if I may call it that, against corruption for quite a while, Magda, and it's gotten you into all kinds of trouble, right? On social media, elsewhere, and even up to the courts. How has the experience been to you?
Look, I think the experience in 2017 versus 2018 is very different. So, 2017 we were truly fighting for the future of South Africa. And it was a very scary fight because becoming outspoken at a time when no one else was meant that, I was followed by state security, I received death threats, I had to have bodyguards. But since the change in December and 2018, one feels that the environment has changed and one can be much more free and almost more outspoken because of the fact that you can see the winds of change and feel that change in atmosphere, and there is hope that those who are responsible will be brought to justice. But it has been quite a roller coaster ride.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you had...
It had its ups, it had its downs.
Sure, and I'm very sorry. I was not aware that you had physical threats to your life. I thought you were just being attacked in the media, social media, and so forth. So, it must have been a horrible experience. But I'm also thinking about the fact that some of the criticisms leveled at you or the attacks were that you were a foreigner, and for that matter, you were a white person. How did you feel about that?
As far as I'm concerned, I'm a South African. I've arrived in this country at the age of 13. I've spent my entire life here. I was educated here, and I will fight for South Africa. I'm white. This country is a melting pot of different races, and I think it's important that we start accepting each other and that we don't allow that race debate to cloud the future of South Africa. South Africa has a very traumatic past, and it's not a past that we can deny. But, in my life, I've always felt that in order to improve, in order to move forward, you only have that much emotional energy. And you need to allocate that emotional energy somewhere. And in my life, I've always tried to allocate 20% to the past and 80% to the future, because that's the only way you can actually affect change. So as much as we can never forget the history of the country, we do need to learn to live with it, not forget, never forget, but move forward. Now, focus on things that really matter.
Let's talk about
education. We need...
Let's talk about 2017, and we will come back to points that you've just made in a moment. You put your life on the line, so to speak, right? And you felt very strongly. I've spoken to you before about this. Just tell me about the extent of corruption that you were seeing, because, you know, I'm sure you sat back at some point and wondered, you are feeling so strongly against this the spread and scourge of corruption, yet there are people who are going out of their way to attack you. What was happening? What were you seeing in 2017?
Look, I think in 2017, the attacks were very, very obvious. You know, there were a huge amount of attacks on social media by Gupta bots, and you had to take it, not with a pinch of salt, because you had to take the death threat seriously. But, you know, I knew where it was coming from, and it was coming from a space where people who were involved in corrupt activities, be it, you know, the Guptas and their lieutenants, or be it, you know, private sector for that matter, were doing everything possible to discredit journalists, civil activists, people like myself, who were trying desperately to bring all of that corruption into the public arena. And really, you know, what we were all trying to do is to rally South Africans around this concept of we need to recapture the country. We cannot allow it to spiral downwards.
What I wanted to establish with you is...
So it was a very clear fight.
Sure, and the extent of the corruption that from where you were sitting, what did you see happen that made you very alarmed and concerned?
Look, I mean, I think the trigger point for me, I mean, apart from the fact that, you know, when the Gupta leaks made their way into the public arena, you suddenly had literally a book which showed you, you know, who did it, what was done, how it was done, and how much was stolen. So the one part of the frustration in 2017 was that once all of that became public, no one was actually doing anything about it. And then, you know, out of the Gupta leaks, what I drew was the involvement of KPMG, who just happened to have been external auditors of Sygnia. And I really became, I don't know, you know, maybe shocked when I called in the CEO of KPMG into a meeting to explain, you know, their involvement with the Guptas and what I was seeing in Gupta leaks. And he sat across the table from me in my boardroom and literally lied to me about what was in Gupta leaks, what their involvement was, you know, and when I presented him with proof of KPMG's involvement, I got a legal letter the following day saying to me, we don't want to know. We don't want to see the proof you have, because, you know, what we don't know can't hurt us. So we are not going to look at our own corruption. We're not going to truly investigate. And that's the first time that I realized that the corporate sector is deeply, deeply involved in the state capture, and that executives of major companies are untrustworthy, effectively are liars, are corrupt, are willing to pay bribes. And, you know, the interesting thing that happened was that the moment I started, well, we fired KPMG, but once I've done that and I started speaking out against corruption, all these companies, McKinsey, SAP, felt the need to come and explain to me. And I don't know if it was, you know, their concern about me then appearing on social media and criticizing them. But all of a sudden, I had all of these executives phoning me, contacting me, meeting with me to try and explain how they have uncovered this corruption within their organizations and how they were dealing with it. And, you know, some of it was deeply disturbing. I remember having a very, very long conversation with a non-executive director of SAP who was flown out from Germany in order to clean up South Africa. And she said to me, well, you know, this concept of paying commissions to middlemen, i.e. bribes, you know, we do that in many countries. But, you know, and it's a standard way of doing business. It's just such a pity that we got caught out in South Africa. And then she said to me, you know, we've now decided as a consequence of the bad publicity in South Africa that we are no longer going to pay these bribes in countries which fall below some level 50 on the world's corruption index. And, you know, can I appreciate that that will have a very significant impact, financial impact on SEP globally. You know, and you're listening to this and you actually don't know what to respond because you're kind of a little bit dumbfounded by the fact that corporates are willing to admit that they pay what they call commissions in order to do business with the public sector. And they do so, you know, quite openly. And it's not an anomaly that happened in South Africa.
Sure. Magda, we'll pick up on this conversation in a moment and look at the silence on the part of the corporate chiefs faced with the evidence and information that there was widespread corruption in our nation. Magda Wierzycka is my guest, and you too can participate in the conversation. The hashtag is the Modise Network. We'll be back in a moment.